Hello and welcome to Penguin TV. It is recorded by George Efelis, aka Whiffy Penguin, and you can follow me on Twitter at Whiffy Penguin. Penguin TV is hosted by PureMTGO.com and sponsored by MTGOTraders.com. Get an 8% discount off all orders over $50 when paying with PayPal or credit card. And you can check out CapeFearGames.com and get an extra 20% off when trading paper for digital. Enjoy the videos. Hello, welcome to the next video. This one is about Time Vault Blue decks. We're going to start things off with Tezzerator, which is a deck that I did a video on a couple of weeks ago. So, the basis of this deck is to get a Time Vault and Voltaic key down, or a Tinker with a Blightsteel Colossus. The different versions of the deck do things a little differently, but primarily this is what you are accomplishing, or trying to accomplish. You gain incremental advantage with your Planeswalkers, which is a huge part of the deck, and the deck archetype, is that all of them run at least 3 or 4 Planeswalkers. This one runs 5. They're usually also backed up with a pretty decent amount of counter magic. This one has a little bit less than your average deck, but it's also built to consistently get Tezzeret down on turn 2. We've got some more counter magic in the sideboard, but this is the main focus of the deck right here, and then the incremental advantage you get with Planeswalkers. Another version of this deck that people might know is the Jacerator, which looks to lean more on Jace than it does on Tezzeret, searching up Time Vault. The Jacerator version of the deck is much more prone to just flat out winning with card advantage. We still have Time Vault, we still have Voltaic Key, we still have Tinker, and instead of a Blightsteel we have a Myr Battlesphere. This is Zach's list, and he is partial to Battlesphere. I am as well. I do also like me some Blightsteel Colossus, though. Now, what this deck does a little differently than the Tezzerator deck is try to bury you under card advantage with Dark Confidants and Jace the Mind Sculptors. Playing 4 of each allows you to just outdraw everything in the format. And then he's got his Force of Wills, and instead of Mana Drains, he runs Mental Misstep, which he swears by. I'm actually still a little hesitant on the Mental Misstep, as I said earlier, and you'll find out later in the podcast, later in the week. But, yeah, one of the things he likes is Surgical Extraction. He's been playing this, and he said that it's actually proving to be pretty good and crippling to some archetypes. But this is the second main version of the Time Vault control deck, which is Jacerator. Another version, which is a mix of the two, would be Explodorator. And this is a blue-black deck, kind of close to the Tezzerator build, where it's trying to just force out early Planeswalkers. But this one has the added bonus of Tezzeret and Tezzeret with Dark Confidant on top. It's got its Force of Wills, it's got its Spell Pierces, it's got its Voltaic Key and Time Vault with Tinker into Blightsteel. Again, the core of the deck is the 3 artifacts, the Tinker, and the Planeswalkers. The last version of the Time Vault-esque decks is probably my favorite one, Snake City Vaults. This deck, instead of, it's got the Jaces, and it's got the Dark Confidants. It's also got Time Vault, Voltaic Key, and Tinker with the Blightsteel. But the thing that this deck does differently is just get lots and lots of mana quickly. So, turn 1 Lotus Cobra with, let's say, Tropical Island, and Lotus Petal. Let's be safe. Turn 2, you get a fetch land, play it, get 1 mana from Lotus Cobra. Sacrifice it for an Underground Sea, get a mana from Lotus Cobra. Tap the Underground Sea, get a mana, turn 2 Necropotence. Or, the 3 mana you got from your fetch land and your Lotus Cobra, plus your Tropical Island, turn 2 Jace the Mind Sculptor. Unfortunately, this deck does not do well when the events were firing. I know that my buddy Dunkelstill was trying to run it, and not to too much success. I'm not sure if it's the deck, if it's matchups, if it didn't have the cards it needed, like Mental Misstep. But this is your basic Time Vault deck. As you saw, all 4 versions run a lot of the same cards with a little bit of a different flavor. Brainstorm is also pretty much an automatic 4 of in all of these decks as well. It's a really good card. And this deck runs really well with Brainstorm, having 9 fetch lands and 3 Jace the Mind Sculptors, turning like everything live. It seems okay. The thing that these decks generally have going for them is that most of them have a pretty good assortment of mana acceleration to race the workshop sphere effects. They tend to have an equal amount of control cards compared to Oath of Druids. And I would say that the matchup comes down to player skill, because Oath of Druids is really good, but so is Jace the Mind Sculptor, or Tezzeret for turn 2 infinite turns, or turn 3 infinite turns. Some of the things that could actually be bad for this are fish decks. If they're running some removal for Dark Confidant and then the actual creatures that remove Planeswalkers, most of these Vault decks tend to struggle a little bit against the fish versions. And also Storm and Dredge. Some of these decks are faster than Dredge, some of them aren't. It depends on who wins the die roll. But if you're going to try and target these decks, the best way to do it is to probably play fast combo with a medium amount of disruption. Mental Misstep might be the thing it needed to kind of even up the Storm matchups, but I generally remember that Storm decks are a touch difficult for Time Vault decks to beat. And I say Time Vault decks, almost every deck in Classic is a Time Vault deck, but these 4 shells that I just showed are the Time Vault decks that actually are using Time Vault as their plan A. Most of the other decks that play Time Vault, like Oath of Druids or Storm, are in there because the combo is so good you can't not play it. But their general game plan is either win with a fatty or win with 10 spells in a turn. So that was, and look, here we see Surgical Extraction again. This is another one of my buddy Zach's deck lists. So we see the Surgical Extractions again, and also Perish, which I'm a big fan of. I'm willing to lose a Lotus Cobra if I can kill 3 guys on the other side of the board. So that would be the Force of Will / Jace or Planeswalker / Time Vault decks. They all run a pretty similar core with a couple of divergent paths, which are metagame dependent. And one of the things that I hope that you guys are realizing as I go through all of these different deck archetypes is that, yes, even though there are only 4 or 5 main pillars in Classic, there's a lot of variation in how you can play those 4 or 5 main pillars. We saw at least 3 or 4 versions of Workshop decks, with more on the horizon. We saw 5 or 6 versions of the Wasteland / Fish decks, with more on the horizon. There were 4 distinct builds of Oath, and with M12 I think that we'll get a 5th distinct build. There are 4 distinct builds of this Time Vault-centric version, and as I go through the other videos, those will come out too, but I hope that one thing you guys will see as I go through all of these lists is that, you know, there's a lot of variation, and there's a lot of ways to make the different archetypes fit your playstyle. Within each archetype, some of them are fast, combo-y, some of them are control-y, and some of them are aggro-y. Like, I would consider this one more of an aggro-ish deck with 8 2-drop, 2-power guys, and the ability to remove blockers with Jace. As opposed to the Tezzerator build, which is more of a combo deck, as opposed to the Jacerator build, which is more of a control deck. So yeah, that was the Vault versions, and I'll see you guys in the next video.